Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be speaking in front of the CPAC. This is either my 12th or 13th time I've spoken at CPAC, but this is the first time I've spoken here at CPAC Hungary, and it's a pleasure to be here in Hungary on the front line of the battle to reestablish traditional values on the continent of Europe. My wife Karen and I just spent 2 weeks on a river cruise from Amsterdam to Budapest. Amidst the natural beauty and the castles and the rich history, one thing stood out to us: churches. In every big city, there were churches that seemingly on every block, and in every little town, there was a beautiful church. They were old churches, but they were magnificent and sacred. There were far more historic churches than castles, and no doubt, more money was spent on building these churches than on the castles. So more money was spent to worship and glorify God than on the national security of the kingdom. What does that say about which kingdom was the priority of Europeans back then? The last church I visited was the Basilica of St. Stephen in Budapest. I knelt before the main altar and was captivated by the life-size statue of the king, St. Stephen. 1,000 years ago, he conquered pagan tribes and brought under his reign to form a nation. And he provided his subjects for his subjects, but he understood those subjects were not chattel. They were ensouled human beings who needed more than temporal goods. So he introduced Christianity. And over his almost 40-year reign, he built out a Catholic infrastructure across his realm to care for the souls of his subjects. Thanks to this type of leadership in Europe, the church and the family became the foundational institutions of Western civilization. They formed and connected people so they could live good and decent lives. But the left sees Western civilization as an evil that must be replaced by a socialist secular state. So they are committed to destroying both the church and the family. And they are winning, not just here in Europe, but in the United States and across the West. They have replaced the God of the Bible with the God of self, natural law with positive law, and the truth with my truth. They made divorce easier, redefined marriage, sex, and gender, while stripping parents of their rights to raise their own children. These destructive lies cannot survive exposure to the truth, so the left have enlisted the media, big business, and the government to reinforce this new moral code and to stifle speech in opposition to it. That's why I want to thank the leaders of Hungary and the organizers of CPAC Hungary for boldly reminding this continent of the importance of God, family, and nation. You correctly place God on the top of that list. From the dawn of time, every human being has searched for meaning in their life. But as a result of the tremendous success of the West in advancing the human condition, a new God has emerged, the God of self. That is not to say people don't worship other gods like Mother Earth, but our economic success has led to pride and a belief in our own divinity, with the right to live through my own moral code, my truth, that caters to my concerns. We have become so focused on our own pleasure, we see marriage, which is a selfless commitment to your spouse, as a limitation on your freedom. And having children as a disease that robs you of your full potential. So most elected leaders, like sheep, not only follow this trend, they feed it by promising even more opportunity for self-indulgence, free of biblical values and the traditional family. The results have been devastating for young people in the U.S. Over 1 million abortions a year. Birth rates have plummeted to below replacement rate. And we have record rates of drug use, we have record rates of depression and suicide. Of course, any movement or leader that points this out and calls to a return of society based on biblical truth and promotion of the traditional family is vilified by the elites, like the Prime Minister well knows. This is not the first time pagans have attempted to ransack and snuff out Christianity in Europe, but none have been as successful as this offensive. Church attendance in Western Europe is almost non-existent. Birth rates continue to descend. Faithful political movements are co-opted and marginalized. And even church leaders fearfully accommodate evil. This descent into moral decay has happened in the West over the past 60 years. But ironically, Central and Eastern Europe were less exposed to this cancer during the first half of this assault because you were behind the Iron Curtain. As the curtain lifted, each country was faced with a clear choice at that moment. Either stay connected to the East or stay connected to the East, adopt full on, join the secular West, or create your own path as a nation, connected to the values from your history. Hungary and most Slavic countries, Catholic countries, chose the latter because providentially, a pope who shared that experience behind the Iron Curtain inspired and supported Poland, Hungary, and others to stand up to secular Europe and stand for God, family, and nation. I had a chance to meet John Paul II on several occasions. The first time was in 1999. I was a senator, and my wife and 4 children were blessed to be invited to a private mass in his chapel, in his apartment in the Vatican at 7 o'clock in the morning. 30 people gathered in his library before we processed into the chapel. Just before we entered, the Pope's secretary instructed me and my family to come to the front of the line so we would be in the first row at Mass. With 4 jet-lagged little children, I declined. But he insisted, and so we sat right next to the Pope, who was kneeling in prayer in front of the altar and in front of a chair. Throughout the Mass, the Pope would go up onto the altar, and when he would come back, he would pause and look at one of my children and catch their eye and smile. After Mass, we lined up to greet the Pope in his library. As the last ones out, we started to the back of the line. And again, I was intercepted by his secretary, Bishop Zivich, who directed me and my family to the first spot in the line. Again, I demurred, but he looked at me in the eye and he poked me and said, "Important man." I immediately said, no. And he cut me off and he poked me again. "Important man." And I said, well, I am a United States Senator. To myself, I said, I'm a United States Senator. But of course I said, no. He again cut me off and poked me really hard. And he pointed to my wife and children. My wife who was pregnant and my 4 children. And he softly said, "Important man." I wasn't important to the Pope because I was a powerful U.S. senator. It was because I was a father. In a chapel full of priests and nuns, the Pope recognized the most important vocation. He realized that strong fathers and strong mothers who form and protect their children's souls are essential for rebuilding not just the church, but a happy and healthy society. Let's fast forward 23 years, and now almost all kids in the United States have cell phones. Less than half have fathers. Children are more connected to each other, but more alone, more depressed, and confused than ever. And so how do we begin to reclaim the family, properly educate children, and restore a good and faithful culture in Europe and the United States? A few minutes ago, the Prime Minister laid out his 12-point plan. He has a lot more time to give a speech, so I can't give you 12 points. But I agree with those 12 points, and you'll hear some of them reflected. But let's start, I think, essentially to the nub, to what's important. Let's start by getting our own spiritual and family life in order and build up from that foundation. The PM in one of his 12 said, make faith a priority. I couldn't agree more. Pray often. Join a church. Take time to study and learn the truth inside and out. He's right. We have to be better. Read books, no more than the others. Establish strong ties to people who share your faith, to encourage and hold you accountable. And I, as a Catholic, I go to Mass as often as I can, and I receive the sacraments. The bottom line is, make the giver of life the center of your life, because life is short and eternity is forever. I have a question for you. Do you know the name of one of your great-great-grandparents? I didn't think so. In not so many years, you too will be forgotten, even in your family. And everything you did in life will fade away. Everything except one. Only one thing you do is eternal. And that's when you cooperate with God to create an immortal soul. I know I don't have to say this in Hungary, but get married and have children. Now, I have done my part on that. I have 7 children. One of them here, my son John, who joined me here in Budapest. And it's the greatest thing I've done in my life. But a warning. I can't tell you the number of faithful conservatives whose children are atheistic left-wing lunatics because they didn't spend time to prepare and protect their children against the evil onslaught they will confront in Western culture. You must, from day one, fight for the souls of your children, because the left isn't having children, which means they need your children. To win, they need your children, and they will stop at nothing to corrupt them. I want to congratulate Hungary for leading the way by courageously speaking the truth, promoting families, and finally providing an environment where God and family are not just recognized but supported. Along with God and family, Hungarians understand the importance of national sovereignty and a common culture. Patriotism is a dirty word on the left, but successful nations are built on a common set of values that provide people desperately seeking connection for an opportunity to be part of something greater than themselves. A country not only has the right, but I would argue the obligation to promote those values within a pluralistic framework that permits all voices to be heard. We lost those values that built Western civilization because my generation failed in their moment of history. I know threats from China and Russia to the east are on the front pages, as well they should be, but societies that have no national identity, no belief in anything bigger than themselves, no stake in the future because they have no children, and no loyalty or love of their country have no chance in any conflict. I congratulate conservatives in Hungary for fighting for those values and for winning here and for fending off the assault on Hungary from both the East and the West. But you cannot survive long just plain defense. Hungarians, Poles, and other defenders of Western civilization must go on the offensive to save Europe and yourselves from ruin. Some generations live and enjoy the fruits of others who made great sacrifices for freedom, truth, and justice. Your generation will not be one of them. Your generation will be saddled with the great burden of fighting that struggle. But what a blessing. What a blessing to be called to battle for your children, your country, and your God. May God bless you with the courage to commit to that challenge, the wisdom and perseverance in the fray, and success in this great and vital endeavor. Thank you, and God bless you.